Thank you, Berna. Good afternoon and welcome to this North Western Area Planning Committee meeting on Monday the 8th of June 2020. My name is Councillor Mrs Maddie Thompson. I'm the chairman of this committee. This is Malden District Council's first remote area planning committee meeting held under new regulations which came into effect on 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 situation. There are just a few housekeeping rules, issues to run through, including our new working practices, which have been implemented due to the pandemic, and the etiquette for this meeting. First of all, could I please ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphone remains muted and your video feed off when not actually addressing the committee. This will reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. The meeting is hosted remotely via conferencing software, which allows members of the public to virtually attend the meeting whilst being able to protect themselves and others and observe the government's lockdown measures. We may encounter some glitches this afternoon, so I hope that everyone will bear with us as we get used to this new way of working. We're streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you all at the appropriate time. Members are reminded that apart from indicating your wish to speak or that you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for any other purpose. Members, the process this afternoon will obviously be different, and for some items I may invite each member to speak in turn. Therefore, I would encourage all members to keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible, please. When speaking and referring to agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number. Could I also ensure that everyone is directly connected to a power supply so that no one drops out due to a short battery life? And lastly, members, if you need to leave the meeting at any point, please make this known and use the chat function to signify, excuse me, that you need to leave. Now I'm going to ask the officers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Lee.
Good afternoon, members and members of the public. I am Matthew Lee and I am Lead Specialist Place here at Malden District Council. Thank you.
Okay, and now Mr. Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Johnson. I am the Lead Specialist Development Management. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Herner.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Devon Herner and I'm a specialist in development management at Malden Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bowles.
Good afternoon. I'm Hannah Bowles and I'm a specialist in development management.
Thank you. Ms. Parker-Haynes.
Good afternoon. I'm Hayley Parker-Haynes and I'm a senior caseworker in development management. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Matthews. Do we have Miss Matthews? Oh, we do have Miss White, Councillor White, by the way, I've noticed. Do we have Catherine? Hello.
Good afternoon, I'm Catherine Matthews from the Senior Specialist.
You're actually quite difficult to hear.
Catherine, your part of your headset's up, so you need to lower it so we can hear your voice.
That better?
That's much better.
Perfect.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least,
Berna Casey, Committee Services and Clerk to the meeting this afternoon. Thank you.
Are there any other officers present who I haven't mentioned taking part in the meeting? Okay, thank you. Berna, could you please carry out a roll call of members to confirm who's in attendance? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. Councillor Bamford.
Sorry, could you just unmute and say
Sorry,
present or
I've
whatever?
done it now. Yes, I am present.
Thank you.
I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
Present.
Councillor Fleming.
Present.
Councillor Jarvis.
Present.
Councillor Keys. Councillor Keys.
He's definitely there.
Yes,
Councillor
he is.
Keys.
Present.
Yeah.
Present.
Thank you.
Councillor Siddle.
Here.
Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Oh, I'm definitely here.
Miss White.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
And apologies for absence, please, Berna.
We've received apologies for absence from Councillor Morley.
Thank you. Right, item 3 on the agenda, members, is the minutes of 3rd of February. It does seem an awfully long time ago. I am going to take them as read. If anyone does need time to read them, please let me know on the chat function. It is recommended the minutes of the meeting held on 3rd of February, found on pages 9 to 14, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. If you wish to second that motion, please just turn on your video and unmute your microphone, state your name now. And if any member wishes to raise any matter of accuracy, please use the chat function to indicate, and I will invite you to speak.
Seconded and agreed.
Thank you. Members, we could do the roll call and vote, but does anyone have any matters of accuracy to raise? Is there any? I'd rather do this by dissent because that's the simple way. Does any member wish to speak? I'll give you 3 seconds. Then I will take those minutes as agreed. Thank you very much, members. Right, moving on, item 4, declarations of interest. This I have to read, as I always do, to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8, inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded they're also required to disclose any such interest as soon as they become aware, should the need arise during the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please use the chat function to indicate now. I can see you, Councillor Durham, as I was expecting you to.
Thank you. As a member of Essex County Council, a non-pecuniary interest, as they are statutory consultees in a number of planning matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? There's not really anything happening on the chat. I'm keeping an eye on it. So
Chairman, we have Councillor Fleming, Councillor Jarvis and Councillor Siddle wishing to declare an interest.
Okay. Is there a reason they're not appearing on my chat?
They're on the meeting chat. I just need to, I'd probably just need to add them to the other chat as well. Oh, yes.
I might not be looking at the right chat. Can you bear with me, members, just for a second?
No, Councillor Fleming is the first.
Oh, I can't get on the chat either. Councillor Keys.
Councillor Jarvis and Councillor Siddle first, and then we'll take Councillor Keys.
Oh, I definitely can't see this chat.
That's the meeting chat. It should be on your right. If you click on the menu, if you click on the little speech bubble next to the two participants, but I'm sending you a message now on this with the chat line that we set up this morning.
Right, I've got you. Thank you.
So it's Councillor Fleming, Councillor Jarvis, Councillor Siddle, and then it'll be Councillor Keys.
Okay, well, I do have Councillor Jarvis first on the list, so shall we go with that first, please, Councillor?
Thank you, Chairman. I have a pecuniary interest, item 6, land adjacent to 2 Grange Road.
Okay, thank you. So you'll be leaving the meeting?
I think that's correct.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. If you can let us know on the chat when you are leaving, and also on the chat again when you come back. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare for agenda item 8. I know the family. The applicant in the past has rented a farm, and the applicant's brother is our baling contractor, so there is a financial relationship there. So I feel that I should leave the meeting and not vote for that item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Same, please, if you could indicate on the chat when you've left and when you return. Right, Councillor Siddle, please.
Yeah, I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest on item number 5, Plainswood House, 25 Plains Road. I know the applicant and I have bought things from his shop.
Okay, thank you. I think most of us have. Right, Councillor White, and then I think Councillor Keys. Councillor White?
No. She hasn't.
Sorry about that. Sorry, I was on another phone call. Yeah, no, I know the applicant of agenda item 8, and the only thing that might be an issue is I have to go on to another call at 3 o'clock. So depending on how long the meeting goes on, I might leave before this comes up. Hopefully that won't be an issue.
Well, we are due to finish by 3, so that all depends on how it goes. Thank you very much.
Chairman, I have another meeting as well, so I will, if I have to leave early, I will let you know.
Thank you. I trust that will encourage us all to be brief. Councillor Keys, please. Hello? Councillor Keys, you wanted to declare an interest?
Yes, I've got an interest, please, on the fiddle on Plainswood House number 5.
Okay.
I've also the same as on number 9 as well. I've bought stuff and done all this for him in a previous time. Okay, but they're both non-pecuniary.
Is that both non-pecuniary? Thank you. Right, are we concluded with the declarations of interest, members? Okay, then I think we will move on to item 5, which is our first planning application. It's Plainswood House, 25 Plains Road, Great Totham. I'll start off by saying I will be moving all the officer recommendations, which does not indicate that I support or otherwise. I won't make a decision until I've heard the whole of the debate, but we do need a motion on the table, so I would be grateful if on the same basis someone would second all those when we come to them. Right, I've said 25 Plains Road. I'm going to ask the officer to present this item. The presentation is being shared on your screen, so Ms. Herner, can you please present your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully you can see the presentation.
I certainly can, thank you.
Thank you. This is a retrospective application. Planning permission is sought for a detached outbuilding which contains garages, a gymnasium and a garden room, and there's also storage rooms in the roof space which are served by dormer windows. The location plan, and you can see the site is to the north of Plains Road. And this is the block plan, so this is the building that relates to the application. It's worth noting that planning permission was previously granted for the outbuilding, but minus the dormer windows that you can see here and the first floor storage space, and this was granted on the 10th of January in 2019. As it's the intention to provide the storage space at the same time as the remainder of the development, then it's considered that the use of the first floor space as storage as well as the provision of the dormer windows requires planning permission. So here we have the proposed elevations where you can see the siting of the dormer windows and the floor and roof plan. So this is the storage space that I'm referring to. Just for reference, these are the previously approved elevations. You can just see the differences that the dormer windows don't appear. And the previously approved floor and roof plan, so there's no first floor storage space. Here we have photos of the front of the site and also the street scene. And photos from within the site. So although there's a concern that the first floor roof space could be used as residential accommodation in the future, because the building is located in the residential curtilage and a condition similar to the one imposed on the 2019 permission, which prevented the use of the building for purposes that are not ancillary to the residential use of the host dwelling could be imposed, it's considered that this building could also be managed by a suitably worded condition. However, the concern is that due to the number of the dormer windows proposed and the size and the extent of the building, the resultant development would appear more residential in character than a subservient outbuilding. Also, the dormer windows would add a new architectural feature to the building, which would erode its relationship between both the dwelling and the outbuilding. There's also glimpses of the dormers that are available from within Plains Road and the neighbouring properties, so it's considered that there would be demonstrable harm to the character and appearance of the site and the rural area, and for that reason the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. There's no one to speak on this, so as I said, for the sake of correctness, I'm going to put the recommendation that the application is refused for the reasons as detailed in section 8 of this report. Is that seconded, please?
It's not seconded by me.
Okay, I need either a seconder or an alternative proposal.
I'll second it. I'll
Thank
second it, Councillor.
Okay.
Well, I'd do an alternative proposal, please.
We have a proposal, so I'm afraid you're going to have to wait and see what happens with the recommendation. But as I say, we're only putting this on the table. We're not committing ourselves to support it or not. So I will go first to you, actually, Councillor Keys, as you, if you're the board member and you call this in. Thank you.
I don't agree to recommendation. Is that what you'd like me to say?
I wouldn't like you to say anything. I just need to.
Is that the correct terminology? I don't agree with the council's recommendation.
Yeah, you certainly can say that.
Yeah.
Would you like to say why? We need a bit more depth.
I called the proposal in. I called the house in. That's why I've called the garage in, or the gymnasium. And I think the dormer windows do add a bit of character, and they only look over the house. And as been stated in the letter, I think we've all seen that was put out, it's in the curtilage of the building. It couldn't be separated. You know, there is no gap between the house and the garage significant enough for it to be a second dwelling, I think. And I think it should be passed. You know, it just enhances. It's a large house in a large plot.
Okay, thank you. Councillor White, please, wish to speak.
Thank you, Madam
If you're at work, please feel free to just use the microphone.
I am at work. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I supported this outbuilding when it first came up last year, because I didn't have a problem with it. And I actually think that in a house that size, they wouldn't want the garage a few feet from their back door sold off to another person. So I don't think, personally, I don't have a problem with it, because I can't see that anybody who can afford that house would want strange neighbours outside the back door. So in actual fact, the height hasn't changed, nothing's changed apart from the look of it, and I actually quite like the dormer windows, and as I don't think it would turn into a separate dwelling. I'm sure the applicant would be happy to put a condition on it that it can't be a separate dwelling. So I actually do not agree with the officer's recommendation, and I'd like to second the proposal to approve it.
Okay, well, we do have to go through the form of voting for the proposal that's on the table, so we'll do that, and if it fails, we'll come to Councillor Keys'. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'd just like to echo what's just been said by Councillor White. I mean, architecturally, the fact that there aren't dormer windows on the house, I think is irrelevant. I think the dormer windows fit in architecturally absolutely fine with the overall sort of look and feel of it. It's a large building, obviously, which has been approved before. I don't think objecting because of the dormer windows stands up to scrutiny. So I'm certainly not in favour of, I think, the proposal on the table. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Right, I will put the proposal on the table. Will those asking Bernard to take a roll call? Sorry if I'm falling over my teeth. This is the first time I've done this. As long as everyone has confirmed they've spoken if they wish to. Councillor Bamford, I can see you. Are you preparing to vote, or did you want to speak?
No, actually, Chairman, I would like to just confirm that on page 19, the relevant history is definitely for this property, because there was another property listed. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Can we go to the case officer on that one, please? Devon?
Yeah, for you, Chairman. Yeah, apologies, Councillor Bamford's correct. That's the wrong address is listed. Just bear with me one moment. Just checking whether that's just a typographical error. So it's the history that's listed is correct, but unfortunately the reference at the top that relates to East Cottage is incorrect. So apologies for that, but that is the correct planning history for this application site.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Berna, could you please take the roll call?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take members through in alphabetical order, and if you can state clearly for, against or abstain. Councillor Bamford?
Bearing in mind this is the recommendation to refuse. Thank you, Councillor
Bamford. This is in accordance with the officer's recommendation, yes?
This time round,
okay, I'm for.
Thank you.
Councillor Durham?
Sorry, did you say Durham?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Agree. Agree officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. Councillor Mrs. Fleming?
Against the officer's recommendation.
Jarvis?
Against.
Keys?
Against the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Siddle?
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Thompson?
I'm abstaining.
Councillor Miss White?
Against.
Okay, the officer's recommendation falls. Thank you very much, Berna. I was keeping count, so I'm correct. Can you confirm I'm correct, please, Berna?
Yes, it's 2 for, 4 against, and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you. Right, we have an outline proposal to approve the application from Councillor Keys, but we need reasons for approval, and we need to agree any conditions that we wish to impose. And I will also look to the case officer and or Mr. Lee and or Mr. Johnson to give us an indication of conditions they think would be appropriate. So, Councillor Keys, while you think about your reasons for approval, could I please go to whichever officer I should? Oh, and Councillor Jarvis also wishes to comment, but can we start with the officer's suggestions and take it from there?
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, the application is retrospective in nature, so there is no need for the time condition that we would normally impose. If members are to look to approve the scheme, I would recommend that conditions should include plans, materials, also in relation to obscure glazing for the dormers, because obviously it's for storage, so that won't be an impact on future living conditions and would protect amenity. And as the officer said in the presentation, we recommend a condition in relation to the building to be used ancillary to the main dwelling. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, you wish to speak. Was that in regards to the conditions or something else?
Well, I think, Chairman, I was just happy to second Councillor Keys. Regarding the conditions, though, the auxiliary condition seems sensible. Could somebody comment as to whether it's normal to have a condition to have sort of obscure glass? That seems a bit excessive. Is that usual?
Mr. Lee, please.
Through you, Chairman. Each application is determined on its own merits, and the conditions that should be imposed need to fit the application before us. As members understand from the plans, this property has a side-on relationship both with the amenity of the existing property and also the site adjacent to it. So I would advise that members should look to protect the potential overlooking, take into account obviously that this is a store area, so there wouldn't be any harm to anybody from impact on like living conditions or anything like that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I have a message from Councillor Bamford for no condition for no permission to use as residential. That was listed by Mr. Lee. Could you just quickly confirm that, please, yep. Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. The condition in relation to ancillary use would mean that it wouldn't be able to be used as an independent dwelling without the need for planning permission. It could be used for an annex. If members had concerns in relation to that, we could impose a condition that restricted that as well. Thank you, Chairman. Right,
I'm going to turn to Councillor Keys on that one, please. If you could give us some indication of your reasons for wanting to approve it and whether you accept the conditions as set out. If not, would you like to add or remove any of them? And then once we have a list of everything, we can have a vote. Thank you. Councillor Keys? It's your proposal. No? Hello, Councillor Keys. I'm asking you to. Oh, right. While we're waiting for Councillor Keys, Councillor Siddle has a comment.
Hello.
To make. Could we? Oh.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. But I've also got Councillor Siddle to comment. But let's have your proposal, and then we'll have Councillor Siddle's comment. So
you can hear me now, can you?
We can hear you now. I
think it's still got my mobile phone next to me. It's come up with some comment about my mobile phone's connected. I don't know why that's connected as well, but anyway. I think the auxiliary or the darkened glass, is that really needed? You know, if he's going to save using artificial light, we've got the dormers so we can have proper lights, you know, external lights. As long as it's included in the dwelling or the footprint of the house. The dormers only look over the house, so I can't see there's a problem why we've got to have obscured glazing. But that's only my what I would come up with, you know. And if they want to use it as an annex, as long as it's in the footprint of the building and it can't be sold away, which I think we've all commented it's too close. And would someone with a load of, would someone with that bought a house like that want to sell the place away? I think we all know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you. So you accept the suggested conditions with the exception of the obscure glazed glass?
I think the obscure glazed glass is not needed, and also I think if they wanted it as an annex, as long as it couldn't be sold away, I cannot see a problem with that at all.
Okay. How about a reason to approve? I'm just looking at the reason for refusal. So you think it is not I don't want to put words in your mouth, but yeah. You don't think it is detrimental to the visual amenity of the area?
Oh, I certainly don't. No, you drive down there. I think if you drive down the road, you see the house before the garage, and if you drive up Plains Road, you see the house before the garage. I can't see it's detrimental to the place at all. I can't see where that's come from, but that's my personal opinion. The house certainly comes into focus coming from either ways up the road, and either if you come down the road by the golf course, which is Beckenham Road, or is it Beckenham Road by the golf course, you see the house before the garage anyway. So I don't see where that's come from, but that's my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lee, is that something you can work with by way of a reason for approval?
Yeah, through you, Chairman. I would summarise Councillor Key's point that he doesn't consider that the proposed development has a strong visual impact on the character of the surrounding area and is limited use in the public realm, and therefore the alterations of the provision of dormers are not going to have a detrimental impact at such a degree as to warrant a reason for refusal.
Okay,
thank you, Chairman.
That sounds like what you said to me pretty much, Councillor Keys, but we have a comment from Councillor Siddle and followed by Councillor Bamford if you wish to speak on the new proposal. Councillor Siddle, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to add that we need to ensure that it is just for ancillary use, and that I don't see the need for obscure glass because it doesn't really overlook any surrounding properties.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've now lost that from the proposal anyway because Councillor Keys didn't include that. So we're with you so far. And Councillor Bamford, please. Councillor Bamford, you had another comment?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I'm a bit slow in getting to the buttons.
Don't worry, we're all getting there. Our first one.
Yeah, I know that I voted against the proposal to approve this anyway, but I do think that it should be restricted from being used as an annex as well. And I know others have said they don't need obscure glazing, but if it's for storage, then I don't see why it shouldn't have obscure glazing, because why would they need to see out particularly? So, well, that's just my points, but I mean, it's already been approved by most councillors anyway.
I think we can see the way that's going, I mean, you can put that as an amendment to the proposal that's already been made to not include, which doesn't include the obscure glass, but I think we can see how members feel about that. But that's entirely up to you. If you wish to put an amendment including the obscure glass after all, please do. Oh, Councillor White has mentioned it's all.
Yes, if I may, Chairman, yes, I would like to include obscure glass and not using it as an annex. But I think, from what I gather from others, they've already accepted that that is fine. So I don't see my amendment's going to make a lot of difference, but if you need to vote on it, then fine.
Well, if you'd like an amendment to be voted on and you can get a seconder, is anyone prepared to second Councillor Bamford's amendment of having a condition on obscured glass, and also I wasn't quite sure about not using it as an annex. I have Councillor White who says he wouldn't want obscured windows in a gym, but the gym isn't upstairs, the gym is downstairs and has normal windows, and Councillor Jarvis wishes to speak. So does Councillor Bamford have a seconder for her amendment? Speak now or forever hold your peace. And Mr. Lee is actually typing. You can speak, Mr. Lee, if that's easier.
Sorry, through you, Chairman. I think the case officer just wanted to raise a point. Devon Herner. Thank you, Chairman.
Absolutely. Sorry, Miss Herner, please. Mrs. Herner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. You actually just clarified the point for me, but it was just to highlight that the gym is at ground floor and she wouldn't actually be affected by the obscure glaze.
Right, so can I confirm with you as case officer, the upstairs, we are only talking about storage. It's a loft.
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Right, we have a seconder for Councillor Bamford's amendment, but also have Councillor Jarvis wishing to speak again. We need to get on with some of this voting, so if we could just have Councillor Jarvis and then move on to voting on the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think my reason for sort of permitting normal glass, if I can put it that way, is they've obviously got dormers because they may want at some point to use it as an annex, and I think that's quite reasonable, and obviously they would want normal glass if that was to be the case. So I think it really goes hand in hand. I think if they were just going to use it for storage, frankly, they probably wouldn't need dormers. So I think they're keeping their options open for the future, and I think that's actually quite reasonable. So I don't wish to. Well, I think you've got a seconder for that amendment, and you'll need to vote on that. But that was my comment.
We do. Sorry, Mr. Lee. As things stand with Councillor Key's proposal, they would be permission to use this as an annex?
Through you, Chairman. It's a bit of an interesting one because at the moment, if they were to build it like this. However, in the future, if they were to do work that was considered to not be development, therefore internal works, as long as it was used as an annex, that would still be ancillary and therefore wouldn't require planning permission. But I said if they were to build it straight out as an annex, then actually that would be a breach of control because that isn't what they have applied for. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so just to confirm, if permission is given and at some point in the future they decide to put a spare bed in there, that would not be a breach of planning control.
Yeah, that is correct, Chairman. If we don't put on a condition, then it can't be. Yep.
Right. To keep things systematic, we have to vote on Councillor Bamford's amendment to include the obscure glazed glass, because we've already established that it will be only ancillary use. Councillor Keyes has commented that clear windows save on artificial light, but if you're only storing things up there, you probably don't need a lot. However,
Chairman, for a point of clarity, obscure glazing is not meaning they're blacked out, so they would still be able to get light in. There is a difference, obviously.
We're talking bathroom window glass here.
Yep, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay, right. Those in favour of Councillor Bamford's amendment, please indicate as Berner calls the roll. Thank you. So,
Chairman. Sorry, Chairman, can I just say, I wanted to come back on this point about not having it as an annex. The whole point of this planning application was is retrospective. It was for storage in the roof space. It was never meant to have windows, and that's the whole point. And we're now being asked to agree something that wasn't originally planned, and that's the reason why I don't agree with this application. You know, if they'd have wanted an annex, they should have applied for it. They did not do that, and I'm not happy with agreeing having windows or glazing that's clear, or that they have permission to use it as an annex. They didn't want that. That's not what they asked for originally. Thank you. And if we're calling, I'm voting for my amendment.
Okay, thank you. Bernard, if you could continue, please.
Okay, so Councillor Bamford is for. Councillor Durham?
For.
Councillor Fleming?
For.
This is only on the amendment. Remember, not the proposal. We're looking at amending the proposal.
Councillor Jarvis?
Against.
Keys? Councillor
Keys?
Against. Sorry, Councillor Keys.
You said against. Against the amendment.
Councillor Siddle?
Against.
Councillor Mrs Thompson?
Abstain.
Councillor Miss White?
Against.
Okay, could you give me the numbers, please, Bernard?
3 for, 3 against, and 1 abstention.
Oh!
Sorry, Councillor Miss White was, sorry. Councillor Miss White, your vote was again?
Again, it was against.
Against.
Okay, that's sorry. That's 3 for, 4 against, and 1 abstention.
Okay, so the amendment fails and the substantive motion remains Councillor Key's proposal, which is to approve because on the grounds that there is no, well, Mr. Lee phrased it perfectly, but basically there is no impact on the visual amenity, and to include all the conditions outlined by Mr. Lee, but not obscured glass. Is that still all right with you, Councillor Keys?
That is perfect, yes.
I'm going to take that. Thank you. Right, so Bernard, could you please take the roll, call the roll on the voting? So it's for, against, or abstain, please, on the new substantive motion to approve.
To approve. Thank you very much. Councillor Bamford. Councillor Bamford.
Councillor Bamford.
Sorry, against.
Durham.
Against.
Mrs Fleming.
Against now.
Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Keys.
For.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Miss White.
For.
That sounds like 4-3.
No, that's 3 for, 3 against, 1 abstention.
You're breaking up a little bit. I don't know if that's you or me.
Sorry, that is 3 councillors for, 3 councillors against, sorry, and 1 abstention. We seem to be, sorry, it is 4 councillors for, because I have Councillor Morley in the mix. That's what's the problem. 3 against and 1 abstention. So that
motion passes and permission is approved as all previously discussed. Is that clear for everyone? About as clear as mud? Okay, thank you. Right, moving on then. We have agenda item 6, land adjacent to 2 Grange Road, Wickham Bishops. In a moment, I'll call on the officer to present the item. Members, a reminder, if you wish to speak, please make this known using the chat function. I will come to you in turn. This is Ms Bowles. Could you please present your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Outline planning permission with matters of access and layout for determination is sought for the demolition of the existing buildings and structures and the erection of one detached dwelling. Here we have the location plan, the block plan, the existing elevations of the former pigsty, the existing floor and roof plans of the former pigsty, the existing elevations, floor and roof plans of the storage building, indicative floor plans, an indicative illustration as the appearance and scale are matters which are reserved, and then we have photographs of the site. So the proposed development is a departure from the local plan. However, an identical scheme has been approved initially in 2013 and again in 2016. There have been no significant changes to the site or surrounding area. And whilst the current LDB has been approved since the determination of the 2016 application, the change in policy position is not considered to outweigh the planning history of the site. Therefore, it is considered it would be unreasonable to object to the principle of the dwelling. Further, it is considered that the site could provide adequate parking provision and private amenity space, and a dwelling could be provided which would not negatively impact the occupiers of the neighbouring dwellings. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm just going to confirm that Councillor Jarvis has gone. He's looking at the chat so he knows when to come back, but he's not conscious of the debate and isn't taking part in it. As he's the ward member, I need to turn to the other ward member, Councillor Durham. Let's go with you first, please, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I support the officer's recommendation, and I think everybody can see the photographs that are in the pack. Don't bear much relation to the floor plans. The floor plans actually make it look rather in better condition than they actually are. So, in line with the previous decisions, I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't, in fact, put the officer's recommendation. Can I take you as a seconder for that, please?
You may.
Right, I've got Councillor White as well. I've got Chairman Chat. Can you stop presenting, please? Oh, okay. We're back on the people. Right. Any other member wish to speak on this?
Sorry, Chairman. I should have declared an interest on this one, that I do know the applicant.
Okay. Did you wish to speak on it?
Non-pecuniary.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Otherwise, I'm going to put the motion to, well, I have put the motion to approve. I'm going to vote on the motion to approve in line with the officer's recommendation. 5, 4, 3.
Is this approved to pass or reject? I don't know what the approval was.
Sorry, Councillor. The recommendation
Officer's recommendations, Keys.
The officer's recommendation is that it be approved subject to a signed unilateral undertaking and all sorts of other stuff. But that's the officer's recommendation, is to approve with some conditions.
Well, this is just an application that has been in before, isn't it? Am I correct?
Yes, it is.
And it had run out.
It run out of time.
And it had run out.
I think something along those lines.
Yeah, that's it. No, I've not got a problem with it.
Okay, thank you. Right, so Bernard, could you just quickly run through the roll call?
Yes, of course. Councillor Bamford.
For.
Councillor Durham.
Agreed.
Councillor Ms Fleming.
For.
Councillor Keys.
For.
Siddle.
For.
Councillor Mr Thompson.
For.
Councillor Ms White.
For.
Okay, that sounds like a full house. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Berna. That item 6, land adjacent to 2 Grange Road, is approved in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Right, moving on. Agricultural barn. This is item 7. Agricultural barns adjacent to 31 Plains Road. In a moment, I'm going to ask the officer to present the item. There is a submission from the agent, which, as the chairman of the council said the other day, I consider can be read in 2 minutes. So if I fail to read it in 2 minutes, that's my fault, not the agent's. I probably haven't practiced as well as he has. So, Ms. Bowles, could we have your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Planning permission is sought for the demolition of the existing outbuildings and construction of 2 detached residential dwellings. Here we have the location plan, the block plan and the parking plan, the existing elevations of the buildings on site, and the existing floor plans. But the proposed elevations for plot 1, which is on the western side of the site, and the proposed floor plans. We have the proposed elevations for plot 2, which is on the eastern side of the site, and the proposed floor plans. The existing and proposed street scene. We've got the site photos. The existing buildings proposed to be demolished are currently in an employment generating use, and it has not been demonstrated that there isn't a demand for the employment use. The application site lies outside of the settlement boundary. It's remote from community support facilities and public transport and would result in an unwelcome visual intrusion. Whilst the proposed dwellings would replace existing buildings, the current built form is former agricultural buildings, which are reflective of the rural area. Therefore, the proposal is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. By the way, I should note for everyone that Councillor Jarvis is back and has been present since the beginning of this item. I need to read this submission. I will do my very best not to fall over my own teeth. This is, of course, the agent's views. I'm merely reading it. Good afternoon, members. My name is Paul Calder. I am a Chartered Town Planner speaking to you on behalf of the applicant for this scheme. Having seen the site or the case officer's photos of the site, members would have noticed that the application site comprises a number of old and tired agricultural buildings. These buildings are of no architectural merit and do not positively contribute to the countryside. The scheme proposes to remove these unattractive buildings and replace the 2 houses that, I feel, match the pattern set by the neighbouring homes along Plains Road. It also proposes to restore a large area to the rear of the site to open countryside, which would have a positive impact. Members would have noticed from the officer's report that, in summary, the officer level of objection to the proposed development relates to the site's location within the countryside and loss of employment. The case officer's reason for refusal does not relate to harm to neighbouring amenity, parking or highway matters. As noted within the officer's report, the application site has an existing unrestricted lawful use as a B8 storage or distribution centre. This lawful use is a material planning consideration, as the site can be operated much more intensively than it currently is. A public consultation event was held to assess the community feeling towards the scheme prior to the submission of this application. As members would have noted from the statement of community involvement that supported the application, the majority of residents supported the scheme and noted that they would prefer to see a sensitive residential scheme rather than the existing lawful use and buildings to remain. National Planning Policy Framework recognises that opportunities to maximise sustainable transport solution will vary between urban and rural areas. We acknowledge that the proposal would lead to some reliance on the private car. However, this is not untypical of a semi-rural location, and this is recognised by the framework. I would also like to highlight that the same framework recognises the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, but does not seek to protect this per se, with protection in quotes being a term now only applied to designated areas and other valued landscapes, which the application site does not fall within. The mere fact that the application site lies outside a defined development boundary does not therefore automatically render the site sustainable. The proposed dwellings have been designed to be in keeping with dwellings directly to the east and south of the site, and this again follows comments received at the public consultation event where neighbours felt new housing should be of similar size, style and design to ensure their own properties would not be undermined. The economic benefits arising from this scheme, including temporary employment during the construction and additional spending within the village, as well as tax receipts from the parish and district council, are also worth noting in these current difficult economic times. Finally, the lack of a legal agreement to secure RAM's payment has not been raised as an issue during the determination of the application, and this could easily have been overcome. I can, however, confirm that should members be in support of this scheme, the relevant payment will be made prior to the issuing of the decision. I genuinely believe this is a positive application, not only because it would support the local economy, but because it would positively contribute towards the landscape character of the area and residential amenity. We hope members can see the many benefits of the proposal, and thank you for your consideration. Okay, members. Sorry, the recommendation which I am putting, and I'm looking for a seconder, please, is that the application for the agricultural barns adjacent to 31 Plains Road be refused for the reasons detailed in section 8 of this report. Do I have a seconder? Failing that, do I have an alternative proposal? Is that seconded?
Seconded, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, members, who would like to comment?
I called this in, Chairman, so can I comment first?
Of course.
Thank you, Chairman. This particular site has had quite a long history in terms of the village and in terms of different applications. And these buildings have no benefit at all to the village and haven't been used for an awful long time. And as my video keeps stopping. You can hear me still though, can't you?
We can hear you fine. If it helps to switch your video off and carry on with just voice, then please.
So in terms of urbanising, you couldn't get more urban than what's there at the moment. It is a brownfield site, and it's just a slight extension of the houses that are already there. So as the report says, there is going to be an effect, and it is a rural area. However, the countryside doesn't start until after these buildings, and as part of the application, which is what I quite like about it, is they are going to restore some of the countryside at the bottom of the new houses. The development in terms of 3.2.1, it's no denser than it is at the moment. Those houses are going to be on large plots, and I think that it will be reflective of the area, and it will enhance the character of this part of the village. In 5.1.4, it states that the countryside will be impacted. It won't be, because this site has already got buildings on it. So therefore, when you look at the street scene, it's going to look better than what's there at the moment. In 5.1.8, the information that's provided there applies to all other houses on Plains Road. It applies to the development that we've just approved in terms of the annex. On 5.1.11, this building is derelict, and if you were to restore, and if it were to use for business, and if it was used for storage and distribution, which is what one of the applications that it has, I think that would have a bigger effect on Totham North than if it's converted into houses, and it would have a bigger effect in terms of transport. There isn't public transport in this area, but that would also apply to a business that's using it. There isn't public transport to take people to work there. Those buildings on 5.4.9, they add no quality to the surroundings. In terms of 5.8, even if it was turned into a business, the wildlife part would also need to be looked at. So one of the conditions I would, if this goes ahead, that we do have a full wildlife survey, but also as part of the development, that we have bat boxes and owl boxes installed. So I'm against the officer's recommendation, and I think that we should approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have the order I've got them, and I hope that's the same order you put your names down, and I'm very sorry if it isn't, but I have Councillor White, Councillor Bamford, then Councillor Keyes, then Councillor Durham. So could we please start with Councillor White and then go on through? Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, I'm mindful this should be approved because basically the buildings are not fit for purpose. You couldn't rent them out for business use because they look to me like they're falling down, and it would probably be uneconomical to rebuild them. And I also think that 2 houses would be an improvement on the street scene to the falling down buildings that were there. And I think they have no use to rent out whatsoever. They're too dilapidated. So I'd like to second Councillor Siddle's proposal.
Thank you. Well, we can't do that yet. We're still on the recommendation, but noted. Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Chairman, for a point of clarity, I'd just obviously like to say, obviously, the council's policy does allow for loss of employment when it's being appropriately evidenced. And I do note the comments that have been made by members. The issue, obviously, officers have is it's not considered that there's been any substantive argument in relation to that put forward by the applicant. I'd just obviously like to highlight concerns from an officer perspective if members were to make, for want of a better word, assumptions based on the appearance of the buildings that they aren't economically viable. You know, this should be supported by appropriate evidence, and if that was to come forward, that reason for refusal would fall away. But I just want to highlight that I do advise members to remember what the policy requires, and obviously, as the officer's report explains, this hasn't been provided as part of this application, and members shouldn't base recommendations or decisions on assumptions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Don't go away. I just have something I want to check. If B8 storage and distribution is a lawful use, does that mean subject to design requirements, etc.? That is a material consideration in an application to rebuild the barns for that use or rebuild a building for that use.
Yep. Through you, Chairman, obviously the lawful use of the site would be a material consideration, but obviously if a new application was to come in, we would consider all the various matters as always. So we'd obviously be interested in protecting the amenity. We'd probably put on standard conditions about non-external works, etc. But that's obviously very presumptuous. Without any application, I can't really comment.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Chair.
Fair point. Where did we get to? Sorry, where did we get to?
I think it's me next.
I think you next. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yes, I think so.
Got too many balls in the air. Sorry, Councillor.
Right, a couple of questions as well as something. I would like to see the existing street scene and the proposed street scene again, if I may. I also wanted to ask if we have a highways update, because there wasn't any comments from highways in the report. And I also didn't see a lot of information about the community involvement, which was referred to in the agent's report that was read out by the chairman. Would this community involvement be a material consideration in looking at this? Because if the majority of the community think it's fine, is that something we should consider?
Through you, Chairman, I can pick up that point. To a certain extent, no. So to be to the blunt, case law is clear that the support or lack of support for a planning application in principle on its own is not a material consideration for the determination of a planning application. An application must be determined on the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Obviously, if members of public raise points that are material considerations, they are a consideration, but the level of support in favour or against an application per se on its own is not a material consideration that should be attributed weight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bamford, does that answer your question?
Well, no, Chairman. I also asked about the highways update. Have we had a highways update?
I'm not sure they even comment on roads like that.
Well, if we're going to approve it, we need to know what the highways would say, surely.
We would, but at the moment we're debating refusing it in line with the officer's recommendation. So shall we see how that goes and let the case officer look it up if need be? In the meantime,
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor White.
Councillor Keys and Councillor Durham, I think.
Right. Not Councillor White. Am I reading the wrong bit of chat? All right, Councillor Keys.
Thank you. I think I've already mentioned my reasons, and I still think that whether a report's been done or not, I still think the report that the buildings like they're falling down is very relevant. I did drive past there and have a look, and I think this should be a material consideration, for it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Keys.
I'm very pleased my fellow ward member is in agreement to disagree with the council on this, because I think anybody saying this is capable of being used for distribution centre storage, the place is falling to bits. And what with the highway, when it was a farm, I remember it was a farm, lorries come back in there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was a pig farm. So I don't really think the highways, it's on a junction. There's a junction coming down from Beckenham Road next door to a big house, or next door to a bungalow that's now next door to a big house, which we have just passed permission for a garage. I think it just improves the street scene, and it will be a credit to the area because it will tidy up that mess. And that's all I've got to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not without technical expertise here. I'm suggesting with a fallback position of B8, I suspect that highways aren't going to be terribly bothered. However, Councillor Durham, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I don't think any of us could sit down and say that what is there is very pretty, and that replacing it with pretty much anything would be an improvement. But not a single member has mentioned the fact that we have an adopted LDP. We still have a 5-year supply of housing land. And by granting this, all we're going to be doing is encouraging other people that have got unused buildings to let them fall into dilapidation and say, well, I just want them as a house. So absolutely, I think this is opening Pandora's box. Absolutely, what is there is an eyesore. But I think we're on very, very dangerous ground here. And as I said, all we're doing is driving a cart and horses through our local development plan that we fought so hard to get. And I will be supporting the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mr. Lee would like to comment, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And to a certain extent, Councillor Durham's just stolen my thunder. Obviously, what I wanted to highlight to members is that this site is outside the settlement boundary. As we have regularly, as a council, stated, just because there is an agricultural building in a certain level of disrepair, this should not be a material consideration of substantial weight in the determination of a plan application. The appearance of these buildings, while they may not be aesthetically high, they are of a rural nature. They normally have a lifespan that obviously comes to an end at a certain time, and the loss of these buildings and the degradation of them goes hand in hand, and obviously they quite often fall away. Any granting of plan application needs to be looked at the lifetime of the development. This would be a number of new dwellings in the countryside that would go forward for a number of years, probably much greater than these buildings would remain in situ, and that should be a consideration. As been explained, the site's outside St Boundary, it's an unsustainable location, and if members do grant planning permission for this, this will be a material consideration determination of future applications. And I'm sure members are aware from seeing appeal decisions, we have won quite a few where applications are just outside settlement boundary, and inspectors say that this does erode the rural character, even when there may be an agricultural or building that appears agricultural in nature on site. So I think members just need to be conscious of consistency and impacts on future developments with this one as well. And once again, that also echoes for the employment aspect. I know members feel that the buildings are not capable, but not having evidence would make it difficult for us to fight for evidence in future applications, because assumptions should not be part of a determination of a planning application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I might just come back very quickly, that if they were agricultural, of course, they are not brownfield.
This is very true. Thank you, Councillor Durham. I have Councillor White would like to come back. No, wrong. Councillor Fleming, then Councillor White, please. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo Councillor Durham's concerns about this application. Yeah, I think he's right. I think the danger is that we do open Pandora's box. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Sorry, Chairman, I was on a phone call. Yeah, no, I just wanted to check what the business use was, because if it's being used for business as the officers are suggesting for refusing the application, obviously Councillor Durham mentioned brownfield, and brownfield is recommended towards residential. The other thing is there is permitted development for also from agricultural to residential. So I was curious what the use actually was at the moment, because it's either brownfield or agricultural, both of which I thought were pretty much permitted development.
Through you, Chairman, I can pick that to a certain extent. The site is not considered agricultural, but notwithstanding that, there would have to be a prior approval, and the buildings need to be fit for purpose to be used as a dwelling. And I don't think it's possible for the council to argue the building's not fit for employment with one hand, and then with the other hand to say they are fit for conversion to residential, as is. Notwithstanding that, the point in relation to brownfield or previously developed land within the MPPF is that that should be a consideration for development outside the countryside. That doesn't mean it automatically needs to be residential. And to a certain extent, as we all know, the MPPF is guidance, and the MPPF even accepts that the local plan or the development plan is the starting point for termination of application. And our policy does not accept residential as a first point of call for land outside a settlement boundary. There is a number of development types that it does encourage, and none of them are residential, and that is something that inspectors have supported on principle in numerous points as a policy point. There may be material considerations for or against in separate ones, but that's sensibly irrelevant. But as a point of principle, our policy does not accept residential as a first consideration for previously developed land. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. My concern.
If I might come back, so the short answer is that theoretically it does accord with the MPPF, but Malden don't agree with that part of the MPPF in their policies. So it is effectively compliant.
Through you, Chairman, no, to a certain extent. It starts that it should be, it's available for other types of development. It doesn't say it should be residential. It just says that would be the first point to look at in countryside, but that doesn't say it wouldn't be community, doesn't say it is employment, etc., etc. It's just a broad brushstroke statement that is obviously then drilled into through the imposition of local authorities' planning policies that use it in a site specific for their own districts points. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. My concern is that we have dilapidated barns all over the district, and that is not allowed for in our local development plan, which I feel this is clearly against.
Quite right, Chairman.
I haven't anyone else to speak, so I've put the recommendation as is, no amendments. Thank you, Bernard. Could you take a roll call of the vote, please? So we're for, against and abstaining to refuse in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you. If it helps, just use voice and not video, because a lot of us are having internet problems, I think.
For
the officer's recommendations to refuse.
Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Fleming. Councillor Fleming. Councillor Fleming.
Councillor Fleming, are you there? Just use audio only if it helps.
Shall I come back to her in a moment?
I think so, yes.
Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Keys.
Against.
Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Miss White.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Fleming.
I'm back. Sorry about that. Sorry, where were we? Can you just
for, against, abstain. Councillor Mrs Fleming.
For the officer's recommendation to refuse.
I'm for the officer's recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's 5 for, 3 against, and no abstentions.
Thank you. So that is refused in line with the officer's recommendation. Now we have item 8, barns adjacent to Mosclin's Farm, Chelmsford Road, Hurley. Again, I have a submission to read out on behalf of the applicant. So could we have Ms Parker-Haynes to present, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Planning permission is sought to regularise the change of use of the agricultural buildings to 2 dwellings. It should be noted that the change of use and external works to the single-storey dwelling are completed and this dwelling is under occupation. However, the works to the 2-storey dwelling have not been completed. The regularisation of the works are required as the development was granted by the prior approval application 15-01096. This consent was granted subject to 2 relevant conditions. Condition 1 required the development to be completed within a 3-year period. Condition 2 required the development to be carried out in complete accordance with the approved drawings. As the development is yet to be completed, the works have not been carried out in accordance with Condition 1. Furthermore, there have been amendments to the previously granted scheme under the 2015 application relating to the location of windows and doors. This is the location plan. These are the existing elevations. These are the proposed elevations. These are the floor plans of the barns. These are the proposed floor plans. And here are photographs of the site. The current application is for full planning permission, and this is materially different to that of a prior approval application. This is explained more in section 5.1 of the officer's report. This application is recommended for refusal as the site lies outside of the defined settlement boundary where policies of restraint apply. The proposed development, as a result of the domestication of the site and associated residential paraphernalia, would substantially alter the open character of the countryside and would detract from the agricultural nature of the site. Furthermore, the development would provide insufficient private amenity space. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Just to note for any members of the public that Councillor Fleming, having declared a pecuniary interest, has left the meeting and did so at the very start of the presentation. I have a submission to read from Susan Strathern, who's the applicant. As before, if I fail to read it in 2 minutes, that is my fault, not the applicant's. Continued response to reasons for refusal, response to reason 2. The amenity space provided was in line with the Cooper restrictions. However, as shown on the location plan within the blue line boundary, there is space surrounding us whereby we can extend the amenity space allocated to the dwellings. The area of private amenity space cited at point 5.6.1 of the report only refers to the private amenity space situated to the rear of the dwellings, but if the area at the front was included, they would both comfortably meet the 100 square metres for the 3-bedroom dwelling and 50 square metres for the 2-bedroom dwelling. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I had to hang it. Sorry, I do apologise, everyone. I'm back. I'm going to start at the beginning of that paragraph again. The area of... No. The area of private amenity space cited at point 5. I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting. I can't take your call. Can you try later? Thank you. The area of private amenity space cited at point 5.6.1 of the report only refers to the private amenity space situated to the rear of the dwellings, but if the area at the front was included, they would both comfortably meet the 100 square metres for the 3-bedroom dwelling and 50 square metres for the 2-bedroom dwelling. Response to reason 3. We would like to confirm that we are more than happy to make the HRA payment of £244.60 and undertake to pay the same. That's it. The recommendation as set out in the report as follows is to refuse as detailed in section 8. If any member wishes to second that motion, please speak now. Anybody?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. That is seconded by Councillor Durham. I will invite members to make comments or speak for or against. That's Councillor White is the other board member, so if you care to start, please do. If you'd like to wait, please do.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't like this application because of the way that it is, that it's after the work has been completed and after it's been habited. However, all that aside, to me, it doesn't make much difference whether it's 1 or 2 dwellings the permission was passed. But I'll leave it to other members because I'm kind of 50-50 on this one. So I personally don't have a problem with it, but I can understand why there is a problem and we do perhaps have to put our foot down. So I'll leave it to other members and then wait to decide on their views.
Right, thank you for that. I have Councillor Bamford and then Councillor Durham. So Councillor Bamford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple of questions, really. I hope the officers can explain about the amenity space. In the report, it says that there is insufficient amenity space, and this is one of the reasons for the refusal. However, in the report that the chairman read out, it mentions using amenity space at the front of the buildings to make it acceptable. So I would just like to clarify how that can be done to include that space at the front. And also, yeah, my phone's ringing. And also the landscape and boundary treatment, which you are recommending at 563. I don't understand why that is needed or how it's going to be put in place. So perhaps on the diagrams or something you could explain about the amenity space and about this landscape and boundary treatments, please.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, I don't have anyone else in my house to answer the phone. So
no, I don't at the moment, unless I set the dog. Mr. Lee.
I can't put it on mute, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chairman. For a point of clarity, the officer's report deals with the private amenity space that would be allocated as part of the planning application. The applicant has indicated that land to the front of the property is also amenity space, but as members are fully aware, we as officers and as decision makers, that includes yourself, are interested in the private amenity that could be used for want of a better word, the family that would be residing in the dwelling. So as often happens, as we know, when members of the public quite often flag up there may be parking areas and areas to the front, but obviously that isn't private, so it shouldn't be included within the area. That's why the officer's report talks about the bit to the rear. In relation to the second point raised by Councillor Bamford, what that's saying is that if members were to look to approve this scheme, we just would consider it, officers consider it appropriate that there should be a condition in relation to boundary treatment, because it hasn't been indicated as part of this application how that would be provided, and officers are conscious of the rural location. We would want to make sure it was an appropriate form of boundary treatment for its setting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, I know you wanted to explain some of the technicalities on this. Would this be a good time, or would you rather hear what the members have to say?
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to do it now.
Sorry, Councillor Durham. I'm getting to.
Sorry. As the case officer explained, this is a slightly complex matter, and I think Councillor White sort of nodded her head to that point as well. In 2015, a prior approval application was granted. One of the conditions for that is that planning permission must be, or sorry, not planning permission, the development must be completed within 3 years, which would have been the 2nd of December 2018. That, sorry, I'm feedback. Sorry, members. Sorry. Since then, council's been obviously received a complaint in relation to the enforcement case that has been opened as this wasn't completed, and therefore the applicant hasn't complied with that condition. And as Ms. Parker-Haynes explained, there's also a condition in relation to the appearance to be done in accordance with the approved plans, which hasn't been undertaken. Therefore, a planning application was required to regularise this form of development. Councillors will be aware that the fallback position when it is permitted development allowance is a material consideration, but the weight to be given to it needs to be reflected by the likelihood of this permission actually being implemented. As explained, due to the permission not being done in accordance with approved plans or within the time, there is no prior approval fallback position because work has commenced, so that has fallen away. So I would advise members that the fallback position is of limited weight in determining this application, which then just brings us to the consideration of a planning application for dwellings in the countryside. And the principle of development, members will be aware that we have refused numbers of applications around this area outside settlement boundary, and because it is not a sustainable location. My advice would be to be very wary and conscious of this when considering this application, because granting planning permission for the dwellings obviously would be a material consideration in any future applications for dwellings in this area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lear. Sorry about that, Councillor Durham. I thought that might help, though. Councillor Durham, please.
Quite. Yes, it's very useful. Well, we're here again, aren't we? Like Miss White, one thing that gets up my nose quite a lot is retrospective. Particularly when people have tried to bend the rules, whether that was intentional or not, it's not for us to say. But as Mr. Lear said, it is not in a sustainable location. We have an adopted local development plan. It's outside the development boundary. We have to be consistent, and I'm very sorry, but I support the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. I have Councillor Siddle and then Councillor White in a moment after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my view is that this is a retrospective. It's there's perhaps been some oversight and it was passed before, so therefore I would go against the officer's recommendation and we should approve these dwellings. Thank you.
I think I might get Mr. Lee back in this. I would explain it, but it was a different kind of application before and the conditions of that haven't been satisfied. So in case I haven't got that right or it needs elaborating, Mr. Lee, could you come back?
Thank you, Chairman. And yeah, to be honest, I probably didn't explain that very well in the last spiel. The application that was looked at previously is a prior approval process, which is basically a form of permitted development that is allowed through the permitted development legislation with a number of restrictions. That does not look at things such as appropriateness of the location, sustainability, or our policies. It looks at whether the building is physically capable of being altered and whether it's been agricultural in nature, and a couple of other points such as contamination. Obviously, that is a consideration, but as I explained previously, the chances of this being able to be brought forward is now not possible. So therefore, as a fallback position, it should be given limited weight. Not saying members can't give it any weight, but it should be given weight that is appropriate for the ability for it to be implemented, which in this case obviously isn't. We're now looking at a planning application, which means that we can consider all of the various material considerations, such as our policies, such as government guidance, etc., rather than just a very strict, very limited number of categories. And therefore, for example, with the second item that we looked at today for the application where previous outline had been granted, and then this was there was a second one that we were looking at. This is very different in that respect, as this is not one application granted 2015, then a new application being in front of us. This is a permitted development application that's fallen away, and now for the first time the council is looking at full plans as a full permission. I hope I've been a little bit clearer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Does that help, Councillor Siddle?
Yes, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Right, we have Councillor White. And that's all I have listed for speakers. So if
Thank you.
Ms. White, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to be careful on refusing this because of the location, because there were two appeals, I think last year or the year before. One of them was for a house, I think, called Sunnyside, which was just opposite where the old pub used to be. That's now a house. Can't remember the name of that either. And I actually supported that one for a 2-bedroom bungalow. It got turned down at committee and then went through appeal, and that was turned down because of unsustainable location, whereas the inspector found it was sustainable. And then on the other side of the road, a bit further along, nearer to the barns at Mosslins Farm, there was another application which I didn't support, which was for removal of agricultural condition and building another house. I didn't support that because the driveway was right on the corner and I didn't think it was safe. But that also got approved at appeal, or allowed at appeal. So the only I would be wary of is doing anything with location, because it's only probably 100 metres or so from both of those. It might be a little bit longer. Obviously, when you drive it, it seems longer. But I do think we can't use, if we do refuse it, we cannot use the location being unsuitable for residential, because we've lost that twice at appeal.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, do you want to comment on that at all?
Yes, through you, Chairman. Obviously, I'd bring members' attentions to paragraph or section 5.7 of the officer's report.
Could you give us a page at all?
Yep, that is page 61 on the presentation I've got. And the officer goes into some detail in relation to the sustainable location of the site, and also talks about a number of appeals, such as the one of 2015 at Tree Lawn, where the appeal was allowed, but that was prior to us having a 5-year land supply, which obviously is a very big difference to where we are now. Obviously, the applicant, and in relation to Sunnycott, which was a 2017 application, which is dealt with in quite a bit of detail by the case officer in 5.7.5. And to summary, says, while there are similarities between the above mentioned application and the current application for the barns adjacent to Mosslins Farm, Sunnycott is approximately 200 metres closer to the settlement boundary of Purley, whereby the pattern of development is significantly different to that of the application site. Furthermore, application should be determined on its own merit. So I think that, you know, the officers have considered those, but do not consider that they are directly comparable, and therefore shouldn't be weigh in favour of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I have no one else listed to speak, so Bernard, could we please have a roll call and a vote on when we are voting on the officer's recommendation to refuse for the reasons as given in the report. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you. As usual, it's 4 against, abstain. Councillor Bamford?
4.
Councillor Durham?
4.
Councillor Mrs. Fleming? Oh,
no, she's not.
Yes, Councillor Jarvis? Councillor Jarvis?
Can we come back to Councillor Jarvis?
Apologies. 4.
4. Thank you.
Councillor Keys?
4.
Siddle?
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Thompson?
4.
Councillor Miss White?
Actually, I've decided to go against purely because I don't believe that the sustainable location is an issue. So that's made my mind up for me. Thank you.
Okay, that's 5. 5 for, 2 against, no abstentions. So that's
carried. Thank you. So that's 5 for the officer's recommendation, and hang on, I'm losing my place here. Oh yes, okay. 5 for the officer's recommendation to refuse, so that is refused as per the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're getting there, but I'm not sure if we're going to manage it by 3 o'clock. So if we could try and keep things as brisk as we can, that would be great. Thank you. Item 9, land southwest of Broadfield Farm, Braxton Park. We have Sorry, I'm getting in a muddle. Page 9. Anyway, sorry.
Councillor Thompson, should we just pause to make sure Councillor Fleming is back in the room?
Oh, that's a very good thinking. Councillor Fleming, can you just give us the heads up when you're back? Because as has been correctly pointed out, I don't want to carry on without you, because then you can't vote. Ah.
I've invited her back as well, so I'm not quite.
Well.
Let's just do one. Let's just try again.
Is it possible to phone her, do you think? Anybody?
She's is showing us unavailable at the moment.
Councillor Siddle says she's trying to connect.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Councillor Siddle. Are you having any luck?
No, not yet. It's not saying unavailable, at least, so.
Oh, I'm about to have a husband appear. Hold on a second. Sorry, I'm in a public meeting, so I'll come and talk to you. Can't get the staff, can you?
Perhaps Mrs. Fleming should play the bill.
I'm so sorry, Jane. We're going to have to carry on if we can't get you back in again. That's very unfortunate.
She's calling.
Ah.
I wonder if she's calling the. It looks like the right meeting, yes. Try. I'm afraid it's still showing just as calling, so I'm not quite sure.
Just going to try phoning her. Hello, it's Maddie. Are you stuck? Aha. Okay, we'll give it a couple of minutes because I really don't want to exclude you. Okay. Thank you. Bye. Thank you. She's swapping routers to a 4G one and maybe with us in a couple of minutes, which I'm going to have to time pretty exactly, really. But I think we might have to carry on without her. Okay, so Miss Matthews, if you could get the presentation up. Only by some miracle, Councillor Fleming appears while you're on the first slide. We're okay. Otherwise, I'm afraid not. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members.
Good afternoon.
So this is agenda item 9. It's a proposal for an agricultural storage barn and related access road at land southwest of Broadfield Farm in Great Bradstead. The location plan outlines the site in red. Block plan is the same plan but slightly closer to. These are the existing elevations provided for the building that was there. Existing floor plan and the proposed elevations. Proposed plan. Reference in the report is made to a previous scheme which was refused planning permission and subsequently dismissed on appeal. These are the elevations for that scheme. I've got photos of the site which aren't 100% up to date. There's some that are updated from last year, but there's some more recent. Reference in the report is made to some supporting information that's been submitted. So in terms of the extent of land holding, this is the drawing that has been submitted, and the red arrow points to the location of the application site within that land holding. Reference is also made to drawings relating to the Rural Payments Agency, and they're referred to as land owned and farmed by the applicant. Again, the application site, the red arrow points to that. And this is another plan when the application site isn't actually on this drawing. So officers consider that the proposal is objectionable for the same reasons as previously refused. So there's no justifiable need for the barn, and the building itself would cause harm to the character appearance of the area, and is recommended refusal on that basis.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to move the officer's recommendation to refuse. Do I have a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. That's seconded. So we are debating the officer's recommendation to refuse. I suspect Councillor Keyes would like to start us off as he called it in. That's your option, Councillor. You can begin or not as you choose.
Yes, can you hear me?
I certainly can. Thank you.
I've called this in. I've called it in before for the applicant, as you're all well aware of this. Have you seen the letter that Stanford sent out, Peter Legree? Has that been issued?
I certainly did. Other members probably have.
Yeah, I'll just like to comment on, he has altered it to what the appeal decision said. We've altered the materials. I still believe that it is needed for the storage of agricultural stuff, because as we all know, he is a landowner and he has got horses and he has got hay, and we all know as well, if you don't lock it up, bolt it down, it tends to disappear nowadays. Unfortunately, it's the time we live in. Can't really argue anymore. It's an agricultural building. There's a building there now. It will tidy the place up, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. In fairness, I did cart down there before this applicant owned it, when it was an apple farm, and it was a busy apple farm at obviously the time when apples were picked. So the building has always been there, and I think it justifies what has been said by Peter Legree from Stanford, and that's all I've got to say on it. Thank you. But I disagree with the councils, and I propose it should be passed if I can do that.
Thank you. Okay, I have Councillor White and then Councillor Fleming, who, although she can't vote because she unfortunately missed the very beginning of the presentation, she is able to speak. So we'll come to her after Councillor White. Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, I'd just like to say that in line with Councillor Keys, this came before us previously. I actually supported it the last time. If I'm right, I think it's a bit smaller than it was last time. And I think it is a useful building. I don't have a problem with it at all. I mean, the site's a mess and I think it'll actually improve where it is.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm so sorry about.
No, that's all right. It's unfortunate. I wanted to ask the officers that whether what sort of evidence they usually require for this type of application. I see in the papers that they feel that the applicant's agent hasn't provided enough information. What would normally be supplied? For example, entitlement statement from the Rural Payments Agency is a piece of useful document, provides land holdings, acreage. So do they have that, or what's missing? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee or Miss Matthews on that one? Mr. Lee.
Miss Matthews, do you want to pick that up? Or do you want me to?
I can do, yes. That's fine.
Miss Matthews then.
Okay. Thank you. One of the issues with this application is that, and one of the things we'd normally expect is for the size and position of the ones and position of the building to be justified. So you could. They've said that they've got certain acreage of land, but would normally expect to say information. For example, we take X tons of hay off the land each year, and therefore we need this volume of space to store it. So the details that be submitted are all, in officer's view, are a bit vague. And the other issue that's being picked up is those drawings that I put up on screen earlier. The land that has been included in the land holding includes land that is not agricultural land, and the agricultural land drawing that's been submitted doesn't include the site as part of the agricultural land. So there's some discrepancies there, and in order to make a sort of a sound full case, we don't feel that has been done by the agent that is acting for the owner, and that as part of the appeal, the inspector also concluded that the evidence on the need for the building of that size hadn't been made. So the new application, there's a bit more information, but in officer's view, it hasn't gone far enough, and maybe the applicant could make a case but hasn't been able to do so as part of the current application. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, Councillor Keys wants to come back at the end. Is there anyone who wishes to speak before then? Councillor Keys. Councillor Keys, you're on. I haven't anyone else.
Hello,
to speak.
can you hear me? Hear me now?
I certainly can.
I'd just like to come back.
Oh, hang on. I've got Councillor Fleming. If you really would like to go at the very end, I need to put Councillor Fleming in first. Is that all right?
Yeah, I would. Certainly, ladies first. Go ahead, Mrs. Fleming.
Thank you, Councillor Keys. Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Keys mentioned the applicant's agent's letter to councillors at the beginning, and I saw that the maps provided were outlined in blue, whereas the agent referred to them being outlined in red, and it would be my understanding that the Rural Payments Agency do outline in red, not blue. So I just wanted some clarification as to whether the colour had been changed, or was it blue when submitted? Just from the officers, thank you.
Ms Matthews? Or Mr Lee? Anybody? My understanding would be that the lines are coloured as appropriate for a planning application, which is...
Yeah, sorry, through you, Chairman. That I don't think, in terms of the DEFRA landholdings plans, whether they're outlined in blue or red as part of the planning application is has any particular relevance. They're just for illustration, really, to show the land that they say is part of the Rural Payments Agency agreement. But for a planning application, yes, red and blue is quite significant, and application sites have to be outlined in red and adjacent land owned by the applicant outlined in blue. But I don't think there's any particular significance or problem necessarily in the way the colours have been used on the letter that was sent round to members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durham, did you want to, there's a message, but I think that was just a communication, but did you want to speak?
No, thank you.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Right, I have Councillor Keys would like to round up, and then Mr Lee, and then we'll vote. Thank you. Councillor Keys.
Right, can I be heard now?
Certainly can.
Right, I think we all live in the rural area, so we all know when you bale straw or hay, it needs to be kept dry. Certain members that keep horses know that is a necessity. He does keep horses, we all know, the landowner and the applicant. It's security, keep animals straw through it. Whether he gets one bale or 4,000 bales off of it, I think it's neither here nor there. There's adequate land that needs to be cut for hay, that needs to be stored in dry, and the machinery needs to be secure. As I said before, it will just get taken. So, and he's adjusted by the letter from Peter Legree. They've altered the building materials it sits in. It's a barn in the countryside, and that is all I have to say. And I would like to recommend that this is for approval again, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Keys. I mean, my reading of the inspector's dismissal of the appeal is that it's not appropriate to have a barn here. So, Mr Lee. Mr Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, my technology was having some problems. Yeah, to certain extent, I just wanted to obviously highlight to members that this is an application that has been previously looked at by the council and has gone to appeal and dismissed. Personally, I don't consider professionally that the application has changed significantly, and the officer's report does highlight that. And as the chairman just stated, a real concern of the inspector, in my opinion, was that the appropriateness of providing a agricultural barn on a site that currently doesn't evidence to be used for agricultural need, and why would it be appropriate to put that here? Councillor Keys just said it's not here nor there whether there's one bale of hay or however many bales of hay, but actually that is a very important material consideration. The need for development within the rural countryside should be evidenced, and as officers, as Ms Matthews explained and the officer's report expertly already does, we do not consider that that has been provided, and this is only slightly an increase in information as what was covered by the time of the previous appeal when the inspector did not consider it was acceptable. So I would just advise members to be very conscious of the previous decision, the summary that is in the officer's report and what the inspector said, and the inspector's decision to dismiss the previous appeal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Lee. So, Berner, if we could have a roll call on the vote, please, which is to for, against or abstain on the officer's recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bamford.
For.
Councillor Durham.
For.
Councillor Miss Fleming.
Doesn't count, I'm afraid.
Oh, of course. Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Keys.
Against.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For.
Miss White.
Against.
Okay.
So that's 5 for, 2 against, no abstentions.
Thank you. So that is refused in line with the officer's recommendation. Item 10 on the agenda is other items of business the chairman of the committee decides are urgent. There are none. I'm going to close the meeting. Members and officers, thank you for your contributions this afternoon. I'm drawing this meeting to close at 2:50. As the meeting is now closed, members are advised not to enter into any further discussion on this forum, because you're on YouTube, and to please leave the meeting promptly. Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Thanks to everyone. Well done.